there's been some flip-flopping by the Premier. And I'm going to read quotes from the Premier himself. In May 2012, when the shared risk model was announced, the Premier stated, "We understand that each pension plan must be carefully examined and evaluated on its own terms, and this shared risk model is not a one-size-fits-all."
Minister Higgs, who's from this neck of the woods, indicated that, there's resistance to change. Well, we've never said you can't change things. We said you should change things on a go-forward basis. And that's where our position is. And he indicated that the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan CEO was quite impressed with the progress that's being made here in New Brunswick. But what he failed to explain was that the
At the end of the day, this is the best model for New Brunswick. We don't buy that.
Under the new shared risk pension plan, the task is telling you that upon conversion, your base benefit won't be reduced. The important piece to remember there is upon conversion. It does not mean in the future it can't be reduced. And they're trying to say it's 97.5% probability that it will not be reduced, but there is a possibility for it to be reduced.
There's been absolutely no transparency, no dialogue, no consultation, no data. Ask anyone for information, either from the task force or government, and their mum.
It's based on this Dutch model. Well, if you've done some recent research, the Dutch model, last year, their fund had 13.7% return. But the administrator has decided, because of the funding ratio, their pension is going to be reduced by 0.5% in April on your base benefit. So they're not going to get any indexation in Holland this year, and they're going to have a reduction on their base benefit, and they're being told there could be a further 1.6% reduction next year on their base benefit.
I'm Russ Hatt, formerly MB Power. I just retired January 1st. But while I was still working last year and this all came to light, the government was using on not only the Dutch model, but they were talking about Australia. And Union President, our business manager, Ross Galbraith, did a whole bunch of research, and the IBEW put out a pamphlet about and they looked at the Australian model quite intensively. And when they went, Australia moved to the shared benefit plan. And what it did is eventually people ran out of money, pensioners. So they ended up being cared for by the Australian welfare. So and what it was in this pamphlet was Australia was moving back to the other pension plan that we now have because it put more stress on the government than what they had before.
Under the Charter of Rights, which supersedes all legislation in Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada has already determined that under Section 15, seniors and pensioners are a vulnerable segment of society and they can't be discriminated against. They can't have a disproportionate impact on retirees and pensioners.
Minister Fleming waxed quite eloquently for several minutes, and the first thing he said was, "It's not a done deal." And he kind of thumped the table. It's not a done deal. So I quickly interjected, well, I'm very glad to hear that, Minister.
There's a case called Quinn versus New Brunswick, and Quinn refers to Marilyn Quinn, who was the president of the nurses union. She was also the chairperson of the Certain Bargaining Employees Pension Plan. That plan, as I mentioned earlier, had a large funding problem. And so they went to the courts to ask the courts, and this was the New Brunswick Court of Queen's Bench, Judge Grant here in St. John, to ask what authority they had to make benefit reductions, or if they could touch retirees, or if they could ask for in contribution increases. And the task force chairperson, Susan Rowland, was actually the lawyer of record for the Certain Bargaining Employees Pension Plan. She went to the courts, and they basically, the pension plan and their legal counsel said that they represent the retirees. Well, Judge Grant said, with all due respect, no, you don't. And he stopped the proceedings and had them hire a separate legal counsel, a person by the name of Eric Kaplan, to represent the interests of the retirees, to make sure they were looked after. And as a result of that, he made a decision, which is in the Court of Queen's Bench decision in 2011, or 2010, sorry. And he said that when people retire, their rights and benefits vest with them at that time, including the cost of living allowance entitlement.